Hello, my name is Kate Rira. Welcome to Climate Dialogues, where we interview climate leaders to follow up on key points and decisions discussed in the past Africa Climate Summit. On Climate Dialogues today, we sit with Dr. Rebekah Shirley, Deputy Director for Africa at the World Resources Institute. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I know you're passionate about climate change. Could you kindly introduce yourself and a little bit about Dr. Rebekah Shirley?
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I work with the World Resources Institute team in Africa and help to lead our work across the continent. I myself am from the Caribbean, but I've been living in Kenya for the past almost 7 years now, doing work on energy access, clean energy transition, and climate and sustainability, which led me to this work at WRI. And because of that focus, I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Wow, I like that. As a participant and also someone who attended the Africa Climate Summit 2023, what were some of your key takeaways from that impactful summit?
A lot came out of it. Of course, we saw the Nairobi Declaration, and through the Nairobi Declaration, that now sort of sets the frame for further conversation on a couple of key areas. As we think about Africa, we're one of the fastest urbanizing regions on the globe. So a big question for us on climate is, how do we resilience or climate proof these cities? 2/3 of our city infrastructure hasn't even been built yet in Africa. And so that's a big topic, and that was a big topic of discussion. Another big one was nature-based solutions. You almost a parallel side to the city's conversation is that conversation about our landscapes in Africa, our savannas, our forests, our drylands, etc. And how do we leverage those for economic opportunity in an age of climate? Other big issues raised were minerals and, of course, energy, clean energy access and energy transition. How do we put ourselves in a place where we have robust energy systems that can encourage, that can invite industry of the future? So it was a really important event. I think there are a lot of next steps. We have to think about how you engage civil society more deeply in these climate conversations. Their voice is so important as we think about justice and equity in transition. And I think, of course, we also have to think about how, in terms of advancing economic opportunities out of climate change, how we make sure that jobs creation is a really important aspect of that. That's something that's top of mind for everyone in Africa right now.
And with those key insights that we have already, economic growth and sustainability is on top of the list. How can African countries leverage this new value chain in climate change? And can we see any strategies that can maximize the benefits of sustainable industries?
Sure. Things like forest preservation and conservation, or even the restoration of forest landscapes, while that might not have had economic value or been seen as an economic sector before, it certainly is now. And as we think about our urban spaces, how we think about urban resilience, urban water and access to water, while that might not have been an economic sector before, it is now. Similarly with energy, similarly with green mobility, green infrastructure. So there's so many new sectors and economies that we can leverage. And I think the benefit is that as Africa, because of our mineral stock, because of our forest reserve, because of our vast clean energy potential, we're well positioned to leverage some of those if we can get our policy, our governance, and our sort of systems in place.
One of the things that show growth is metrics. What are some of the metrics that are put in place, maybe by the WRI, or have been discussed during the climate summit that could be used to determine how far we are growing, whether is it actively in the job sector or economically?
So you might, for instance, look at jobs created per megawatt installed, if we're talking about energy. So we've got, you've installed 50 megawatts worth of solar. How many jobs per every one of those megawatts did you create? Both in terms of direct jobs, meaning people that are employed by your organization or your company. Indirect jobs, meaning that they're indirectly involved in your sort of the ecosystem of services that you're providing. Or induced jobs, meaning that because of the service that you've provided, that energy that you've made available, now they can go and do other things. So you've induced these other opportunities. Another common metric is jobs per dollar invested. So this is a big one for donors. Donors always want to know if I'm going to invest $1 million, let's say, into energy access for Kenya, how many jobs have I created? Or if I'm investing $1 million into agro-processing technologies, how many jobs am I creating? So those are the kind of metrics that we normally look at. A third one would be a metric for demographic, so youth and women. And this is always very key for us. And I think that we find that in the energy access world, while women make up a smaller percentage of direct jobs, what's very interesting is that they make up a much larger percentage of indirect jobs. So that points to the challenge of, well, how do we ensure that women have access to formal routes of entering into the labor market? So this gets back to, technical vocational training, how we ensure that we provide certification for skills that people may already have, but they just need a certification for that skill so that they can access a formal job. There's so much that we have to do on cultural barriers for women in the workforce. So these kinds of metrics are very helpful because they point us in the right direction in terms of, well, where does policy need to go to make sure that it's opening up the market for as many people as possible?
With creating more job opportunities, I know on the front line, the biggest percentage in Africa right now is the youth. And I do understand that one of the biggest initiatives from where you sit is to impact and try and push for green skills for the youth. What are some of the focus initiatives and programs aimed at youth skill development in the renewable energy sector?
Well, it's an interesting question because you would think that because of how big the energy access challenge is, there should be waves of jobs that we're creating for people to start filling that space. When you talk to companies on the ground who are doing decentralized renewable energy, meaning mini grids or solar home systems, those kinds of things, or improved cook stoves and so on, one of the things that they'll tell you is that the factor that's holding us back in terms of being able to see sort of a mass transition to energy access across the continent is not so much the technologies, but the human capacity to do it. And so the types of things that we need to see happening are, programs that help to capacitate our young people relative to the needs of the sector. Also, we need to see recruitment pipelines being established from our universities and our technical vocational and training centers directly into the workforce. We need to see different types of training offered that is revamped and revisioned vis-a-vis the needs of the sector. And we also need to see a lot of government support in terms of policy, in terms of helping to create the access to finance that companies need. So there's a number of different areas where we need support. In terms of initiatives, you can look at schools like Strathmore University that have now established a master's program for energy transitions. They have many training and certification programs. A number of our TVETs like Don Bosco and so on are moving in the direction as well. We have recruitment firms that are focused and specialize in energy access like Shortlist. So there's a lot happening in the space right now, and I think that the sector is going to look very different in 5 years' time.
What are some of the opportunities that could scale up the green skills among the youth and people in Africa, especially in renewable energy?
Yeah, I think the renewable energy sector is one of these key sectors that, if we get it right, can unlock potentially millions of jobs for youth across the continent. And we have to keep in mind that, there's 10 million young people pouring onto the job market every year in Africa. So finding solutions that both meet our economic needs, meet our climate and sustainability needs, and create waves of jobs, creation opportunities, that's sort of like that's the golden chalice. And I think renewable energy is one of those opportunities. We did a study a couple of years ago that was actually the first ever census of renewable energy jobs across the continent in key markets like Kenya and Nigeria that are more progressive on decentralized renewable energy technologies. And what we found is that decentralized renewable energy technologies are already providing or creating rather as many jobs as our traditional utilities, as our traditional energy utilities. when you dig deeper into that, you find that that's just direct jobs. Informally, there's so many other jobs that are being created or that can be created. And then when you look even deeper beyond that, once now there is this establishment of energy access somewhere, that can create multifold other sets of job creation opportunities through leveraging that energy access. So we talked about all of the types of SMEs that are doing agro-processing, SMEs that are doing mobility, and I'm thinking now about the dozens of companies we have in Kenya doing electric mobility, electric boarders, electric buses, etc. So there's sort of concentric circles of jobs creation opportunity possible through the delivery of energy access. And we're just talking about electricity. When you think about now clean cooking and cooking fuels and alternatives to our standard way of cooking, which is, with fuel wood, you're thinking about biomass, improved biomass cook stoves, ethanol cook stoves, etc. There's lots of companies in these spaces. So there's much opportunity. And you might ask, what types of jobs are you talking about, Rebekah? When you say jobs in the space, what are we talking about? And my answer would be all of the above. There are technologists and technicians, obviously, that are catered to their types of energy technology, whether that's solar, wind, or biomass. But beyond the technical, beyond technicians, and I think we sort of have in our minds that energy is this only a STEM field and a science and technology field. But beyond the technicians, we need, we need marketers, we need sales managers, we need people that are doing finance and accounting. We need sort of everything across the spectrum. And when you think about it, there are now hundreds of SMEs that we can name that have cropped up over the course of the past couple of years that are creating these opportunities at both the upstream of the energy sector, as we're talking about in terms of manufacturing of products, into the sales, and also the downstream and sort of the after sales use of energy technology. So it's a fascinating space. Lots going on, and I think it's one of the sectors that's really going to unlock massive opportunities for youth employment for us across Africa.
Let's take a focus on WRI and how you are integrating data and technology in addressing the food and energy challenges in Africa. First of all, what is the role of data and technology in that very sector, and how effective is it?
Oh, I might be biased, but data is so important. Data is so important to how we make investment decisions. What if not with data do you make a decision on as an investor? So I think for us, our approach is, how do we create data platforms that support policymakers who are making decisions about how to develop incentives? How do we provide data that supports enterprises so that they know where potential offtake sits and where potential resources sit? And how do we develop data platforms that support investors as well? So what we've done, we have a platform called the Energy Access Explorer. It's one of maybe almost 24 platforms that we have at WRI that are sort of open access data platforms. And what Energy Access Explorer does is it allows you to understand where resources, like we were mentioning, where we have strong solar resource, hydro resource, biomass, waste resource, etc., across the continent, and sort of match those with where needs are. And you can actually build out an energy plan. Where would I build generation, and where would I build transmission and distribution to reach customers? And that kind of data is absolutely crucial. It helps counties develop county energy plans. In fact, we've worked with a number of counties in Kenya to develop county energy plans, which then aggregate up to our national energy plan for Kenya. And it also is helpful for investors. I'll just give you one quick example. We've done a lot of work with Makueni County here in Kenya. And we were just recently with Governor Mutula Kilonzo, who will give you examples of how the county energy plan that we were able to help Makueni County develop has been used. One of the ways that it's been used is bringing missions of investors to Makueni County, leveraging that data to now show where potential investment opportunities are. So here's where we want to do solar irrigation, and here's where we want to do cold storage, and here's where we want to do dairy processing. And once those things they're not theoretical, they're real. You can show geographically, in my county, here's where we're talking about developments, here's what their size would be, here's what we estimate the offtake would be. Then it's such an easier exercise to convince investors this is the place to be. So that's, for me, the way that we like to leverage data, both for policy making, but then also for creating access to finance for sustainable solutions.
What role do the local communities play in these intersectional interventions? And we can highlight some of the community involvement and empowerment projects that you have done in the sustainable project.
I mean, what role do communities have to play? They're everything. They are the role. They're everything. In terms of enterprise, which is what we were talking about earlier, we're not necessarily talking about big industries that are going to be the future for Africa. That can be balanced with this growth and sort of an exponential growth that we're seeing in the small and medium-sized enterprise space. And in fact, if you look at agro-processing today, in Kenya specifically, it's being led by this revolution of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises in agro-processing. They're doing everything from honey processing, grinding and milling for maize and on all sorts of products, egg incubation, there's fruit drying, fish drying. There's so much that's happening right now in this space, and it's all being led by small and medium-sized enterprises. So the community has a huge role to play in innovating and in sort of creating the enterprise opportunities that will both offtake energy, but also deliver this economic opportunity for us as a society. I would also say that civil society and community has a big role to play in advocacy, as we're seeing right now in Kenya, right? The civil society and the community, they apply the pressure. And so if we're calling for, educational programs and training and vocational programs that directly target some of these areas that we've been talking about today, if we make that call louder, it will help to sort of open up that space for the community. So I think they're a humongous voice in the climate conversation.
You have mentioned the change and especially the growth in agriculture and adding value. So that clearly shows that there are new value chains in sustainable agribusiness and renewable energy that is transforming Africa's industrial mix. However, there is a shift between the traditional and sustainable sector. What would be your comment on that? Have you seen the change in the traditional way of how industries are transforming, and what can we do to join in onto sustainable industries?
Sure. From an agricultural point of view, an agro-processing point of view, yes, we're seeing a shift. I'll say three things. One is we've seen in the past decade, agro-processing has expanded almost exponentially across the continent, and especially here in Kenya, we have so many examples of companies that have emerged and been established in the past 10 years. So that's one. But one that's showing us that it's becoming more sustainable is, we were talking about energy solutions earlier. One of the fastest growing energy technologies in Africa is commercial and industrial solar. And here in Kenya, we now have well over 50 megawatts. I'm sure that's a very outdated number in terms of installed commercial and industrial solar. You might ask, well, what does that mean? It means that now a number of manufacturing and both heavy and light manufacturing and sort of commercial enterprises are actually moving towards a renewables base. So we can see that that's a major trend. Another thing I would say is, we've seen a lot of talk about greening agriculture. Kenya in 2002 made a sort of a landmark agreement or MOU to support green ammonia and green fertilizer production here in Kenya, leveraging clean energy technologies. So we are definitely seeing some change. There is now the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance, AGHA, where other countries are also joining into this new era of what do green fuels look like and how can we leverage green fuels in Africa given our vast renewable energy stock. So we're seeing change, but there's so much more way to go.
I'd want to know, what are some of the hopes for the future of Africa's sustainable development from you?
Well, I think as we've been saying, we're all aware of Africa's resources. We're all aware. The whole world knows about Africa's mineral stock and its forest reserves and its agricultural lands and the energy resources and even the youth population that we've been talking about. It's the youngest population on earth. Young and getting younger. I hear that all the time and I like it. So these are all, assets that we have on the continent. And my vision and the vision of WRI is an Africa where we have leveraged all of these assets to grow sustainable, robust, thriving economies and sectors that are delivering jobs creation, that are protecting our landscapes, that are resiliencing our city communities and our rural communities, and that are delivering a climate benefit to the world. I think my vision for Africa is this hope that we can realize our potential to be the first continent on the face of this planet to stake its very development on the idea that people, nature, and climate actually work better together. That's the vision I have. It's this aspiration that we're so committed to as WRI, and it's entirely within reach to be this example to the rest of the world.
Africa is the youngest continent and is growing younger. A powerful insight from our guest today, Dr. Rebekah Shirley. This is Climate Dialogues.